Hello, everyone, and welcome to Continuing the Conversation, live from the 2012 APWA Congress Expo floor. My name is Emily Barta, and we are going to start the day off talking about green infrastructure. Let's talk maintenance. And that which is going to help us talk about green infrastructure is Peg Staeheli, who's sitting right next to me, and she is the president of SVR Design Company. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Great. It's fun to be here with everybody.
So many people here in Anaheim, California, so many people joining us from home, and we are so appreciative that you are here with us, even though you can't physically be here with us in Anaheim. And we're really excited to bring you this conversation because Peg actually has a session happening this afternoon at 3:45. So for everyone here in Anaheim to get to take even a closer look at green infrastructure, let's talk maintenance. Be sure to check that out this afternoon at 3:45. And for everyone joining us from home, we get to chat about it now. So remember, if you have any questions at any time for Peg about green infrastructure, let's talk maintenance, go to that lower left-hand corner of your screen, click on that Q&A button, and let us know what question you have. And don't forget, APWA is on Twitter. Follow that conversation at hashtag APWA Expo. So, Peg, let's get started. The public is hearing a lot about sustainable systems and green infrastructure. So, are you seeing this approach across the country? Or is it limited to the larger agencies and the more innovative cities?
We are seeing it across the country. It's taken quite a boom. It's past the trend stage, from California up to Maine, New Hampshire, down to Florida. Texas has just gone forward with applications. We see it in the upper Midwest in Canada, and we're starting to see it actually getting to place where I would call it infrastructure as opposed to just testing.
Fantastic. So it used to be kind of a trend. It was new, it was innovative, but now it's really taking a stronghold all across the country. What was the evolution? How did it go from being this new idea to this implementable idea?
Really, I think the evolution came out of the work that was probably up Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, New Hampshire, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle did a lot of test projects, and as they applied things and they were successful, people started looking at them and finding ways. I think it fits with people wanting more from their infrastructure systems, so you get kind of a multiple performance approach.
Well, definitely one of the things that we see here at APWA Congress and Exposition is peers learning from their peers, and the importance of sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing case studies, what works, and even as importantly, what doesn't work. Green infrastructure, is it regional? Is it geographical? You know, how can we learn from each other?
Well, that's a really good question. Just using the word green sometimes implies wet, rain, and actually green is really taking an approach for more of a natural system. So whether you're in a dry climate or the northwest mossy, shady area, it's still considered green infrastructure. And the idea is in combination with other urban treatments that you're using the natural systems to treat the water.
Wonderful. Now, what do you see driving green infrastructure implementation? Regional city codes and regulations, or agencies responding to internal and political encouragement? Where's this being driven from?
I would have to say that there's probably two drivers right now. One would be the regulations are looking for improved ways to treat our water so that our creeks and lakes and our saltwater bodies, that the water going in off of the built environment is clean. The other side is actually coming from people wanting more out of their built environment. So people looking at, as they walk along, they're in the city, or if they're on a trail, as they walk along, they want to see more of a natural approach and bringing that nature back into the urban environment.
So they want to see more, and we want to make sure that we answer all of your questions, so give us more. If you have any questions, be sure to go to that lower left-hand corner of your screen and click on that Q&A button. And for everyone here in Anaheim, if you have any questions at any time, just feel free to raise your hand, and we will get those taken care of as well. So what do you see as the most significant barrier with regard to green infrastructure operations and maintenance?
Well, I think the first one, and that we're hearing at the conference, and there's a lot of discussion between agencies and design firms here, which is who's maintaining the green infrastructure. So it was one thing when we were putting them in, but now they're in, and they're starting to be more and more, thousands of feet, all over the place, and really becoming implemented, a spread across the cities. So who maintains them? That's a real big discussion, and we need to catch up to that discussion and decide and work that maintenance issue out, because certainly living systems need maintenance. Gray systems need maintenance.
Okay, you just brought up a really good point. You said, here that I'm at the Congress, I'm hearing all of these different conversations. Prior to getting on the plane and coming here, has the conversation changed? Based on everything that you've found out from conversations that you've had just over the past couple days, has any part of your program or your session later today changed, or has your opinion or your philosophy changed?
Well, I'm hearing that things that we're seeing in Seattle are also happening in other places in the country. This question of who maintains is a big question across the country right now. The other is just explaining it to the population. I think the early ones were done in neighborhoods that wanted them, and now we're looking at it as a system. So it's an infrastructure system, and those things sometimes are not easy to put in, whether it's a new sidewalk in front of your house, changing out the road signs, or now using what might have been a planting strip and using it for an additional purpose for water quality. Those need education, and we need to step back or step higher and work with the public before we get into the implementation phase.
Well, you know what is easy is to ask a question. So if you have any questions about green infrastructure, let's talk maintenance, be sure to go to that lower left-hand corner of your screen, click on that Q&A button, and it looks like someone has. Dana, do we have a question for the virtual audience?
We do. Emily, Peg, Lawrence from the virtual audience, good morning, and thank you for joining us again. Peg, Lawrence was wondering, is green infrastructure, is the implementation being made possible with the implementation of context design? Oh, that seemed like a good question, because Peg had a great reaction.
It's really important. Context with green infrastructure, and you can take this with, there's also topics here about the Federal Highways Program with context-sensitive solutions in designing your roads, and that same application happens in green infrastructure. You can't just take one idea and apply it in another place. It has to fit, whether it's a residential application or what we're calling ultra-urban design of green infrastructure. You need to tailor it to the adjacent conditions, and that takes some tweaking. So some places where you would use rock cobbles might not be appropriate in a residential neighborhood. It might look too harsh, at least up in the Northwest, and so you would want to tailor that to the location. You also want to watch your plant materials, that they match in with the context of the neighborhood or the downtown that you're putting them in.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different variables that need to be looked at during the planning stages.
There are, and it's about design and engineering, and it's not just cookie cutter. You really need to do your math, do the aesthetics, work the public involvement, and then at the very early stage, understand, and I think that's what the maintenance people are telling us, is you need to understand the maintenance as you're doing the planning.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lawrence, for that question. If you have any more, you know where to go to submit them. Now, green infrastructure includes many different technologies. So how should public works official prioritize which ones they maintain in-house and which ones are better outsourced?
Well, that's a really good question. I was sitting next to someone from, a town in Iowa, and they were looking at both doing maintenance in-house as well as maintenance with contract crews. And I got the feeling, and I think this is consistent, is it's not one or the other in what you're deciding. It's just have a plan, and there may be some advantages to having almost a hybrid system. So often with green infrastructure, you get into certain conditions in your seasons that you might need more help. So have an industry prepared from the private sector and have your staff prepared to assist as well.
Sounds like lots of preparation in the planning stage, in the implementation stage, extreme variables, different geographical, different environmental considerations. So I don't know, it actually seems like it's a puzzle, and a really fun puzzle to put together.
It is a puzzle. I think public works in general is a puzzle, and you do need to listen to a variety of players when you're looking at green infrastructure, as well as other systems. But green infrastructure is actually involving the utilities, the roads, your pedestrian access issues, the very frontage connections, whether it's to a storefront, to a school, or to a residence. So you're really taking all the pieces of public works and overlapping them as you're applying a green infrastructure system. Remembering these are plants, soils, trees, rocks, so they're living systems, but they need to be managed.
They need to be managed. And what we love to do is manage your questions, because after all, this conversation is for you. And it looks like we have another one from the virtual audience.
We did have a great question come in. Lisa, thank you for submitting this question. And Peg, she would like to know if there's funding available for the maintenance of green infrastructure projects.
Well, that is a good question. Green infrastructure projects, public. So we basically need to fund them through either our public works, through our taxes. If you're in a neighborhood association and that's your treatment in the right of way, you'll fund them through those fees. But there wouldn't be any, at least right now, we're not seeing any federal funds for maintenance, but that's where the public needs to start thinking of these as the multiple benefits. And certainly how when we're designing them, we need to understand what the funding for the maintenance aspects are.
Thank you so very much for that question. If anybody else has any more questions, we have a few more minutes with Peg, so be sure to go to that lower left-hand corner of your screen and click on that Q&A button to submit them. And in the meantime, now green infrastructure systems such as bioretention, swales, and rain gardens appear like landscape treatments, but public works employees are used to the traditional, the gray infrastructure maintenance. So what should they be told about maintenance for green infrastructure?
Well, first of all, they are living landscape systems. However, there is a purpose for them, a function that is beyond an aesthetic, and I think that's the very most important thing. For most, especially ones along the right-of-ways in our roads, you need to watch for sediment. So the sediment buildup is key. So it's very similar to what you would be looking for in your catch basins or your gutter lines. We're also looking for sediment. So that kind of maintenance is similar. The other, I think, that changes is just, the seasonal changes that occur. And with those, you need to watch your clear zones so that you have definitely along the right-of-way that you can see your sidewalks and you can see your intersections, so you don't want your plant materials blocking. So we generally like to keep those low. And I guess the other one would be if they're ponding. So if you start to see ponding that stays for more than 24 hours, you want to identify those as a problem, and then they need to be addressed.
And what I see is another question from the virtual audience. Dana, what do we have?
Yeah, Leland was asking something similar. If snow and ice control is addressed in green maintenance and green infrastructure maintenance, and the use of chemicals.
Okay, well, a few questions there. Specific to snow and ice, if we're talking like permeable pavements, actually they perform better. And that's kind of a little bit of a surprise.
A nice surprise.
A nice surprise.
Yeah.
But a couple of things that you need to tailor a bit is your snow plows need to actually be adjusted because often pervious pavements are not smooth, and so you want to adjust the snow plows to allow for that. But generally you'll see less ponding, and the snow will go away sooner with them. As far as the salt, those are considerations in the plant materials, and also maybe some of the spacing we do. So if there's salt used on the roads, you want to think about the different grasses or plants you use to know, are they dormant in the wintertime? Is there space for the snow to be pushed aside? Will it really harm the conditions of the materials? But really, I think in the snow, it actually may have one of the higher performance benefits.
Interesting. And interesting that we have another question from the virtual audience. Thank you so very much for all of your input.
Sure. This one is coming in from Omar. Good morning, and thank you. Peg, he is asking, how often do you have to maintain a permeable pavement?
Well, that is a really good question, and there's all sorts of stories out there about how often. And it really does vary according to the use. On a residential street, We have seen them go without much maintenance, but generally you would like to see them swept. Depending on the traffic and the conditions, 1 to 4 times a year. Right now, permeable pavements are not used so much on the arterials, but we're starting to see some of that. So the more traffic you get, the more sediment conditions you get, then you'll be on the higher end, more like 4 times a year for sweeping. And then periodically you may have to come in and do some more intensive power brushing, or they do some vacuum like you would do with a kind of like on a simple home basis with a shop vac and water and suck it back up. You can use similar equipment, or you can get pretty fancy with some of the trucks and amazing equipment actually that's out on the grounds today here, which is a good place to look for new equipment to maintain our green infrastructure systems.
Well, for everyone who's not able to join us here in Anaheim, California, and not able to attend your session later this afternoon, what are some resources that public works officials can go to find out more about planning and implementing green infrastructure?
Well, APWA has quite a bit on their website, so that's a good place to start. We have put a handout to go along with the talk that I'm giving today, and there's 3 or 4 pages just on resources, specific, more tailored toward the maintenance side, but in general. I would say if you Google green infrastructure, you will find quite a bit of information. Philadelphia, Texas, Portland, Seattle, Maryland has some new information on it, DC. So you're going to find things all over the country, which is what I would advise. I'd advise people to read a lot of information and use multiple sources, because it's still relatively new and there's a lot of fresh ideas coming out.
Well, Peg, thank you so much for providing us all of this information on green infrastructure. And if you would like some more information, be sure to visit apwa.net or do an internet search on green infrastructure for many, many case studies and articles and resources to give you more information about green infrastructure, implementation, and maintenance.